to implement. With that explanation, Mr. Sponsor, did we get a motion on that?
Motion on the bill.
We have a motion and a second on the bill. Thank you. Mr. Sponsor, you're recognized for an explanation of your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Today, a cashier at Walmart in Nashville would have to work more than 823 years to earn what the company's CEO, Doug McMillon, was paid last year. Similarly, a crew team member at McDonald's in Nashville would have to work 865 years to earn what the company paid its CEO, Chris Kopinski, in 2021. This bill is to look at the system of income inequality that Tennesseans are subsidizing by our taxpayers having to subsidize these corporations and pay for SNAP and TN-3 benefits because of the shortcomings of these corporations. And when a big corporation has a huge disparity in pay between workers and the CEO, it's Tennessee taxpayers who pay for health and food assistance for their workers. We are subsidizing some of the largest corporations and most profitable corporations in the history of our nation, and it would be completely unnecessary if these companies respected their workers and paid a dignified wage. I want to share some statistics to kind of help make this point. According to a report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, more than 5.7 million Medicaid enrollees and 4.7 million SNAP recipients worked full-time for 50 or more weeks in 2018 and earned wages so low that they qualified for these benefits. Researchers sent a questionnaire to state Medicaid and SNAP agencies and analyzed data from 15 such agencies across 11 states, including Tennessee. Each agency reported the 25 most common employers of Medicaid enrollees and SNAP recipients. Among the 15 agencies, Walmart was in the top 4 employers of program beneficiaries in each and every one. In Tennessee, the top companies employing workers who qualify for federal assistance are Walmart, McDonald's, FedEx, Dollar General, Kroger, and Amazon. This CEO pay disparity tax begins to reform our broken state tax code by ensuring that large, successful corporations either pay their workers or pay a fair share of taxes. This bill does not tell companies that we're not going after the CEO pay, saying that, if you can pay your CEO however much you want, but it has to be parallel and equal in proportion to how much you pay workers. This bill would only tax businesses that pay their CEO more than 100 times the employee, and it would increase excise taxes by 0.1%. If you look at the fiscal note from our office here, this bill would generate more than $8 million in revenue for our state in fiscal year 24 to 25. Just a 0.1 tax increase on these businesses that are paying obscene and immoral amounts of wealth to their CEOs and paying starvation wages to their employees. Tennesseans on both sides of the aisle are concerned about this issue. According to a national survey, more than 52% of Republicans and 66% of Democrats are concerned with the excessive income inequality between CEOs and workers. And so this is a bill that is not about left or right. It's a moral issue of right and wrong. We should no longer subsidize these businesses, these models of business that create obscene amounts of wealth for a few at the top, while our working class constituents in my district and in your district are suffering, and we as a state are paying the cost and burden. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll submit the bill and take any questions.
Members, you've heard an explanation of the bill. A reminder, this committee is not the standing committee for this bill. We cannot kill it or help it survive. We can only recommend approval or disapproval. That said, you've heard the explanation. We have a motion for the bill to be before us. Chairman Lafferty, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. People do get paid a lot of money in this country. Some people don't get paid enough money in this country. Folks that don't get paid enough, some of the cashiers that you cited, do you believe that those folks are locked in those jobs for the entirety of their lives?
Sponsor recognized.
Thank you. What I know is that these are the workers who are on the front lines and who brought us through the pandemic, and their wages remain stagnant while these CEOs got bonuses and increased salary rates. That's what I know, is that we have a system that keeps people locked into cycles of poverty. And so people there, we don't, the American dream that my grandparents talked about was that you could go up. But we see our system now, there are all these barriers and blockades from helping people advance their lives to live lives of dignity. And we see this massive income inequality that did not exist when many of these members on the committee were my age. We did not see this massive, obscene amount of wealth inequality. This is a rather new phenomenon we're seeing in our country, and so people are stuck and trapped. These are my constituents, your constituents in Knoxville as well, who are suffering in these low-wage poverty jobs. I'm working 2 jobs trying to make ends meet. I'm working 2 jobs for full-time jobs for part-time wages. It is immoral. And I think this is something that we can agree across the political spectrum. We don't want to see our constituents stuck in these stagnant positions, but that they should be able to advance themselves. And keeping people with these poverty wages where they have to rely on government assistance programs does not do that. In fact, it harms our constituents.
Follow up, sir.
My apologies, I had a hard time following that answer. Do you think that folks, it's very simple, do you think that the folks in these cashier positions are stuck there for a lifetime?
You recognize, sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Many of them are, yes, Mr. Lafferty, Representative Lafferty. Many people are trapped in these low-wage poverty jobs, and because they have to choose between paying for their groceries or paying for their prescriptions. These are what we're dealing with. The constituents of my district, a working-class district, who don't have any decision but to work at the Dollar General and the Walmart to try and feed their children. They are trapped in these jobs with these poverty wages. And as Dr. King said, we have a system that has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. And that's what we're dealing with.
Last follow up, sir.
Oh. All right, last follow-up. I'd wanted one or two more, but I'll try and make this quick.
I'll come back to you.
So, free market capitalism is the only economic device that mankind has come up with where I take what I work for, I hand it to a vendor, the vendor hands me some product in return, and we both say thank you when the transaction is over. To say it is immoral is wrong, because both people agree to the transaction and both people have options to go different directions if they choose to do so. Back to FedEx, since you referenced them. A man that risked everything to grow a company to what he's created today, is he not deserving of as big a paycheck as he can get? Or do you just totally believe that we should ditch free market capitalism and go toward a socialist society?
Mr. Sponsor, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are two questions, so I'll take both of them. The first question is that what is immoral is that we as a state are subsidizing these corporations. So it is not free market capitalism because we as a state are paying, as I cited from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, a nonpartisan office, more than 5.7 million Medicaid enrollees and 4.7 million SNAP recipients qualify for federal assistance. People who are working full-time jobs, we're subsidizing their benefits as a state. That is wrong. So that is not capitalism, that is socialism for these corporations where we're giving welfare to them and subsidizing their gaps that they're paying their workers $7.25 poverty wages while their CEO makes billions. That is immoral. If I go to scripture, I go to Isaiah 10, woe to those who pass unjust laws that hurt the poor and rob them of their rights. So if you want to talk about immoral or if that's socialism, I just want to quote that is immoral.
Mr. Sponsor,
And
we
so-
have other people that want to ask you questions.
Okay. His second question is that my attack is not, I'm not attacking what you call free market capitalism. What I'm attacking is a system that is stacked against working class people to keep them locked in these systems. These are the people who brought us through the pandemic. Once again, we called them heroes a few years ago, but now they're stuck in these jobs on the front lines, not getting any of the benefits. The people who work at Tyson, the people who work at Walmart, who got us through the pandemic, who are still struggling, while their CEOs got got bonuses, and the workers saw no increase in their wages, stagnant wages. That is immoral.
Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank you. I appreciate you bringing up the part about in the past this didn't happen. And I know that this example is not a private company, but I know as a teacher, years ago, teaching assistants make low salaries, but they always made enough to live. And now what we're seeing with a lot of teachers' assistants is they are also having to get SNAP benefits and that type of thing. You're exactly right. We are not doing what we need to do for these people who are critical to our way of life and to our economy. So thank you.
Okay, the chair detected no question. Next on the list is Representative Bulso. You recognize, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jones, Tennessee has long recognized this legal doctrine called the business judgment rule, which is a presumption that officers and directors of corporations have a fiduciary duty to their stakeholders to act in the best interests of the corporation. And obviously, it is the directors of corporations who set the salary for the CEO and the other officers of the corporation. Then the officers, in turn, set salaries for other employees in accordance with market conditions. And given that Tennessee has long recognized the fiduciary duties that directors and officers of corporations have to the employees and officers of those companies, why, in your view, is it appropriate for the Tennessee General Assembly to decide that it knows better than the officers and directors of the corporation what salary a CEO or any other employee of a company ought to be paid?
You recognize, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you so much to my friend, Representative Bolso. I think if the state was not subsidizing the social service safety nets, if we weren't subsidizing TN-3 and SNAP, then we shouldn't have a say. But it is the state taxpayers who are paying for the shortcomings of these corporations. It is our taxpayers who are paying for their workers to have health care and to have food benefits and many other social safety net programs because the corporations are paying poverty wages. So we already brought into this, whether we like it or not. As I cited, I won't cite a statistic again, but millions of people who are working for these corporations rely on benefits from the government. So we are already involved. And these are people who work at Walmart, Tyson, FedEx, who we're paying for their benefits because the corporation is not paying dignified wages to their workers.
Follow up, Representative Bolso. Other questions? You recognize, sir.
To the sponsor, thank you. When you say these people are stuck in these low-end jobs, I'm wondering who you think has them stuck. Because one of the great things about America in my adult life is that I've been in all kinds of tax brackets in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s. I've been all over the map. I've never been stuck. And what I'm hearing you say is Tennesseans, that the government is holding people hostage, that we have them stuck. So please clarify that for me.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. That is incorrect. I'm saying that these corporations have them stuck. If we look at economic mobility, when some of my friends like Representative Carr were my age, we had greater, Representative Reagan, when you were my age, there was greater economic mobility amongst people could buy a house, they could have, children in a family, but now we see such economic stagnation recently where we have increasing wealth inequality that did not exist back when some of my colleagues here were my age. And so what we look at is this economic stagnation. And I think this is something, again, that transcends partisan divides, but it's something that we have to really have a serious conversation about, is why are people my age not able to purchase a house? Why are they stuck working at Walmart and then when they get off work, going to work at 7-Eleven, to working these full-time jobs for part-time wages just to feed their children? Just to make sure that their children have the tools they need to go to school. I mean, these are real stories that I've heard on the campaign trail, talking to people, knocking doors. People are stuck. And we look at the price of housing going up, we look at the price of the cost of living going up, and we don't see wages rising for anybody except the corporate CEOs. And I want to say, too, is that these CEOs don't live in Tennessee. The people who work for these businesses do. The people who work at Walmart live in our districts. The people who work at FedEx live in our district. These CEOs are out living on the Cayman Islands. They're living their best life. And our constituents are suffering and paying the consequences. And so I ask my colleagues here, let's stand with our constituents, not these multinational corporations. This bill does not apply to small mom and pop businesses, but it applies to these big mega corporations, multinational corporations who could care less about Tennessee taxpayers and Tennesseans as a whole.
Point of correction, sir. Fred Smith, the CEO of FedEx, in fact, lives in Memphis. I visited his home.
Thank you. One example out of millions, but I was referencing if we want to look at McDonald's, if we want to look at Walmart, if we want to look at Tyson Food, but if you want to find one example of a CEO who lives here, props to you, Chairman Reagan.
Do you have follow-up, Representative Martin?
No, sir.
Chairman Lafferty, you have follow-up, sir? Representative Johnson, you're recognized. I'm sorry, I'm out of order. Chairman Kumar, you're recognized, then Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sponsor, I feel really concerned because this is basically inspiring and creating what is known as class warfare. There are poor people stuck and rich people there. It's not a new ideology, and it wants to punish success, but yet it doesn't help the person who you think is at the lower ring of the ladder. If somebody has the lower ring of the ladder, does your bill do anything for them? In the sense that does your bill propose how to give them a hand or how to give them a ladder they can climb up, rather than basically having this feeling that the system is just unfair? That is, people not everybody, but it can be, circumstances, what people, the decisions people have made, options.
System that treats all
Massive tax breaks, but the citizens in our state are not.
system that treats all
Mr. Sponsor, I feel really concerned because this is basically inspiring and creating what is known as class warfare. There are poor people stuck and rich people there. It's not a new ideology, and it wants to punish success, but yet it doesn't help the person who you think is at the lower ring of the ladder. If somebody has the lower ring of the ladder, does your bill do anything for them? In the sense that does your bill propose how to give them a hand or how to give them a ladder they can climb up, rather than basically having this feeling that the system is just unfair? That is people, not everybody, but it can be, circumstances, what people, the decisions people have made, options available to them. But I really think, I think class warfare is very, very divisive. It does not improve our society. It does not create a better conditions in our society. I really feel concerned, and I don't think we should go there. If you have a proposal how we could help those at the lower ring of the society, and is it in this bill, kindly point it out to me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sponsor, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with all due respect to my friend, Representative Kumar, I'm not inspiring class warfare. What I'm inspiring is a system that treats all members of our beloved community with dignity. If I can go a little bit to if you want to look at a moral example, because everyone here claims to talk about religion.
Sir,
Can I just use this example, please? It'll help make the point, Mr. Chair, to the comment about class
address
warfare.
his question, please.
The question was about class warfare. But if we look at what Jesus was challenging, if we look at the Greek, when he said, blessed are the poor, he used the word patokos, which means those who have been made systemically poor. And that is what I'm challenging. This to me is a moral obligation for us to care for those who Jesus called the least of these. And so I'm not inspiring any type of warfare or violence. What I'm inspiring is a system that treats people with dignity and equality when it comes to those who are actually advancing our society, and it's working class people. And so, Representative Kumar, when I hear your question as to is there anything that we can do to address this system, my proposal is a very meager 0.1% rate tax increase as a way to incentivize corporations that pay their CEO 100 times more than the average worker. This is a very meager ask to say that we as a state, we want to help our people get off social service programs. We don't want our people stuck on these government assistance programs. We hear that all the time. This is a bill that is trying to start that conversation with our corporate partners to say, will you pay your workers at least less of a gap? We're not saying you got to cap your CEO salary. If you want to pay them all this money, at least let's not make it 100 times more than what the average worker is. The people who are actually bringing our community forward, the people who are actually working on the front lines of these businesses, they should be a part of the success as well. And that's what I'm saying. And so, again, I'm not inciting violence. I feel like your suggestion was hinting at I'm calling for violence or I'm calling for unrest. What I'm calling for is a community that's at peace with itself, Representative Kumar. I'm calling all of us to higher ground. This is about treating people with dignity. And so that people in my generation can have the same type of America that my grandparents talked about when they talked about economic mobility. I just want to live in a country like that, and I want my children to live in a country like that. And I want all of our people to enjoy a part of the fruits of the labor and not just the few at the top.
Follow up, Chairman Kumar.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next on the list is Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out, because FedEx was referenced, was just a couple of years ago, the single largest tax break in our budget was $21 million for FedEx. And I think it was the very next year we gave them a massive tax cut in jet fuel. And the reality is, since 2017, we've given FedEx 3 big tax cuts in jet fuel, and we have raised prices at the pumps for Tennesseans 3 times. I think it's important to note that when you're talking about that equality, those folks at the top are seeing massive tax breaks, but the citizens in our state are not.
Chairman Eldridge, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we've talked some about the economic development here and the state putting money into companies. What would be the impact on Tennessee, say, if FedEx decided to move out of state? These companies have the opportunity to go anywhere they want to. And we're talking about minimum wages and smaller wages and everything like that, but what would be the impact on a community, say, as Memphis? Say if FedEx decided it wanted to move to another state, what would happen there? Also, the same with the WalMarts and all these companies. I mean, they provide a number of jobs to the community, and we're talking about the employees having to subsidize. But where would they be if they did not have that job to go to? What would be the impact there? And I think that's what we need to really look at. And also, as far as how much a CEO is paid, most of these companies have a board that governs that, and that should be their deal to look at. But I think when we're looking at economic development, I mean, Tennessee has done a lot. And even with the Ford project out in West Tennessee, is there not going to be any economic benefit to that area with Ford coming there?
You recognize, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first part is that you had three parts of your question. I want to address each one by one. This bill would apply to businesses with nexus in Tennessee. So any business that does business in the state of Tennessee. So it doesn't just have to be headquartered here or be based here. But McDonald's, they're not headquartered here, but they would apply to this legislation. So I don't foresee any of these companies completely abandoning Tennessee simply by a 0.1 tax increase to subsidize. The second part of your question, you said that I stated that the workers subsidize these corporations. That is incorrect. I stated that the government subsidizes these corporations by paying for their SNAP and TN-care benefits because the company is paying them starvation wages. To your third point of economic development, this is not a bill that will hinder any economic development. A 0.1% tax increase, again, less than 1%, we're imposing on these corporations, multinational corporations, to simply say that help us compensate for what we as a state are paying. Since you're paying poverty wages, we're paying for the social safety net programs of your workers. Help us so that our taxpayers are not given the check. We want to be reimbursed just a minimal amount from these corporations for what Tennesseans are already paying and have been paying. And so this is not about hindering economic development. It's not about trying to stop any business or run them out of town. It's simply saying that our taxpayers should not have to pay for the shortcomings of corporations. The government should not have to pay for people to stay on government benefits because corporations are paying starvation wages. That's all that this bill is saying. 0.1%, very meager.
The question's been called. I have one more on the list. Would you like to withdraw on that one more? Chairman Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate withdrawing the motion there. I just wanted to raise a point. I mean, I would encourage everybody, regardless how you feel about this legislation, I would encourage everybody to take a look at the trends of economic mobility. There is little dispute across the political spectrum that economic mobility is decreasing in the United States. Even a college education doesn't guarantee financial stability in this country. We have over 47 million people in the U.S. ages 16 to 64 whose annual incomes are below 200% of the poverty level. And that's not necessarily because of those individuals or because that's the trend. And with healthcare costs increasing, inflation, and everything going on, you really need to look at all the variables affecting upward economic mobility and look at those trends. And I would just encourage this body, regardless how you feel about this legislation, to really consider how we can address that to provide opportunity for everybody. I would argue that the American dream isn't dead. It's just becoming more challenging for too many Tennesseans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Sponsor, any response? Seeing none. Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've appreciated all the comments and banter on this, and I keep hearing this term economic mobility, I want to remind our sponsor and our committee, the government has very little responsibility when it comes to economic mobility. But I want to tell you, take you down memory lane real quick since we brought up economic mobility. If you want to be mobile with your finances and be able to move, Tennessee is setting the bar in the entire nation. Nobody's getting it right like we are. What do I mean by that? I mean, we have a thing called the Tennessee Promise. We have a thing called the Tennessee Strong Act. We have a thing called the Tennessee Reconnect. What does that mean? That means if you want to better yourself and have economic mobility, we are making it possible for you to work hard, go to school, get a certificate, and do something with yourself. And what we've done as a state is we've paid for the majority of that. Does that mean you might have to work during the day and go to school at night? Absolutely. But you know what? A lot of us have had to do that. I was raised in a single wide trailer, raised very poor. My dad taught us to work. I started a business with nothing. There is nobody that's a victim here unless you want to stay a victim. You have the ability in Tennessee to wake up tomorrow and do something with yourself. And our government, the state government here in Tennessee, has made it possible for you to have economic mobility by putting yourself in school. And we're going to pay for the majority of it and get a license, get a degree, do something, and you can see that paycheck grow. Because people don't pay for just a person who can, we're not going to pay a CEO salary for a person who can flip a hamburger. We pay for knowledge. We are putting you in the position in Tennessee, no matter what age you are, to get knowledge, to learn how to do something and become a professional. Whether it's being a plumber or whether it's being a doctor, we are doing things right in Tennessee. So I just wanted to make that, if you want economic mobility, it's in your hands to do it.
Can I respond, Mr. Chair, to the?
Hang on just a second. There was no question asked, sir. The question has been called.
Can I make a final closing statement?
Hang on. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, Mr. Sponsor, you will be recognized for a closing comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with all due respect to both chairmen, I hope that you do vote for this bill. And I just want to state that according to a 2020 study by the Sycamore Institute, Tennessee children are less likely than children across the nation to out-earn their parents and to see increase in their economic mobility. Tennessee has one of the lowest compared to our nationwide counterparts, according to the Sycamore Institute. Kids growing up in Tennessee are less likely to climb the economic ladder than other American children, and I can send that report to my colleagues on this committee. But more than that, colleagues, again, I'm glad we had this conversation because that's what the purpose of this legislation was. We as a state have to look at all of our constituents across my friend in Cott County. I mean, this is going to impact all of our constituents who are in stagnant positions. And I don't think it's a victim mentality. But I think, we constantly tell people to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, but we constantly are changing the materials from which these bootstraps are being made or giving people no bootstraps at all. It is an unequal system. And while there are a few examples of successes, overall, systemically, we see that across race, across geography, people in Tennessee are struggling and are stagnant, and the pandemic exacerbated these issues for our constituents. And so I just hope that we would consider this legislation. When you go to Walmart, when you go to McDonald's, talk to the worker, ask them, why are they there? How long have they been there? What is their hope for their children and for the future generations? Have conversation with working class people. I was just in Murray County this weekend, and I'm going to be traveling across the state talking to your constituents because those are the people, not just in Nashville, but across the state who are struggling. And I hope that we can stand together across partisan divide and say that we want to lift up our constituents and lift them up to higher ground. Thank you.
Members, the question has been called. A reminder, we are not the standing committee on this. We can only recommend approval or disapproval. The bill is before us because it contains rulemaking. With that said, we have a motion before us. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we are voting to send House Bill 747 to Finance, Ways, and Means. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
No.
Nays have it. The bill goes out with a negative recommendation to Finance, Ways, and Means. Members, that concludes our regular calendar. We have no business before